threw his stepsister into the fire, but you won't believe what happened next. Betrayed and abandoned, Liona rose from the flames, armed with an unimaginable power. What Kembu thought would destroy her ignited her path to revenge and justice. Watch as she transforms her torment into a fiery rain. Mbaya was a village wrapped in beauty, with red soil that glowed under golden skies. Its people lived simple lives, and at the heart of it all was Chundo, a brave hunter chief. He was known for his strength, but even more for his heart. He had 2 children, one born of his blood, the other rescued from fate. His son Kembu was his firstborn, proud and quick to anger. His adopted daughter Liona was a quiet flame, gentle in nature, but powerful in spirit. Liona had arrived in the village as a baby, wrapped in ash-stained cloth after her home had burned in a fire. Chundo had found her near the edge of the forest, crying beside the remains of what was once a hut. He brought her home and raised her as his own. The village accepted her, and over the years, she became a daughter of Mbaya. But Kembu never accepted her. He saw her as an outsider, a shadow taking light that belonged to him. Where he demanded respect, Liona earned it. Where he barked orders, Liona offered help. The elders praised her for her kindness. The children followed her, not him. Even the animals seemed calmer around her. This ate at Kembu. Each time someone spoke Liona's name with affection, his jealousy grew sharper. He believed he was meant to lead Mbaya one day, but deep inside, he feared the people would one day choose Liona instead. And so, what began as quiet resentment slowly turned into a dangerous hatred. While Liona spent her days helping elders, healing wounded animals, and gathering herbs for the village healer, Kembu plotted in silence. The more the village loved Liona, the more invisible he felt. Chundo, proud of both children, remained blind to the fire building inside his son. Then whispers started, small things. Kembu telling others that Liona brought strange luck, that fire followed her, that she wasn't meant to be an Mbaya. At first, no one listened, but Kembu had a way with words, and slowly, doubt crept into hearts. Still, Liona smiled. Still, she worked. Still, she loved the family that raised her. But in Kembu's eyes, she was the flame that needed to be put out. Liona had no memory of her real parents. All she knew was fire, flames that swallowed her home, screams in the night, and then silence. She was found in the ashes by Chundo, wrapped in a burnt shawl, barely breathing. While the village mourned the fire's mystery, Chundo took her in without question. He raised her as his own, gave her his name, and protected her with a father's love. But not everyone accepted her, especially not Kembu. He hated the way people spoke of Liona with wonder. He called her a stray, a burden, a mistake. She doesn't belong to our blood, he often whispered with poison in his voice. When others praised Liona, his face twisted in silent rage. Yet Liona never responded with anger. She rose before the sun to fetch water for the elders. She stayed late by the healer's hut, learning to cure fevers and mend cuts. If a bird fell from a tree, she'd cradle it. If an old woman dropped her basket, Liona would be the first to lift it. She asked for nothing, but gave everything. The villagers began to notice. Some said she had the grace of the forgotten gods. Others believed she was blessed by the spirits of the ancestors. There's a light in her, they said, a fire that doesn't burn, it heals. Kembu saw the same light, but to him, it burned with humiliation. No matter how loud he spoke, or how hard he tried to command respect, it always returned to Liona. The people trusted her more. Even his own father smiled more in her presence. That truth became a thorn in Kembu's heart, one that sank deeper every time someone chose Liona over him. In his eyes, she was not a sister. She was a curse wearing a smile. And deep down, he was already thinking of how to make that smile disappear forever. Kembu's hatred didn't fade. It grew quietly, like a snake waiting to strike. He watched Liona win hearts with her kindness and calm, and each smile she received felt like an arrow in his pride. But Kembu knew he couldn't touch her openly, so he began to whisper. His voice was soft, but his words were sharp. Have you noticed the strange things? He told the villagers. Everywhere she goes, something happens. First her parents burned. What if fire follows her? He didn't shout. He planted seeds. Seeds of fear, doubt, and suspicion. He reminded people of the fire from years ago, the one that killed Liona's family. He asked, did anyone ever find the cause? What if the fire started because of her? Some villagers laughed at first. But fear spreads faster than truth. One old man said his goats wouldn't eat after Liona walked past. A mother claimed her child fell sick after touching her hand. Little by little, Kembu's poison worked. People started keeping their distance. Greetings turned cold. Doors closed when Liona walked by. Even Chundo, the father who had once called her his own, started to look at her differently. He didn't say anything, but his silence was heavy. He spent more time with Kembu, listening, nodding, frowning. Liona noticed. The warmth in the village was fading. Where once she was met with smiles, now there were whispers. She felt it in the way people avoided her eyes, in the way children were pulled away from her touch. But she said nothing. She continued to serve, continued to love, even when love was not returned. Kembu saw it all and smiled. His plan was working. With words alone, he was turning an entire village against her. He didn't need to raise a hand. He was letting fear do the work for him. Fear and lies dressed as truth. And as the village turned colder, the fire in Kembu's heart burned hotter. He wasn't finished. Not yet. He had planted doubt, but now he wanted to destroy her completely. The night air was dry and sharp, typical of Hamatan winds, but the village of Mbaya glowed with laughter and dancing flames. It was the Ember Festival, a sacred time when the people honored the spirits with music, fire, and offerings. The air smelled of roasted maize and burning herbs. Drums echoed through the trees. But while the village celebrated, Kembu had something darker planned. Earlier that day, Liona found a note at her doorstep. It was hurriedly written, but clear. Father is sick. Come quickly. Come alone. Sacred Grove. Her heart skipped. Without questioning, she ran. The sacred grove was quiet, far from the festival noise. Trees swayed. The ceremonial fire pit still burned low from earlier rituals. It was meant only for sacred items, never for people. She stepped into the clearing, eyes scanning for her father. That's when she heard a rustle, then felt a hard shove from behind. Before she could scream his name, the world turned orange. She fell into the fire pit. The flames shot up, wild and hungry. Her scream tore through the grove, piercing the night like a blade. Back in the village, the drums stopped. People looked around, confused, then worried. Minutes later, Kembu returned, face soaked in fake tears, holding a torn piece of Liona's shawl. She's gone, he sobbed. She slipped. I tried to save her, but the fire took her. The cursed girl is gone. Gasps filled the air. People wept. Some believed it was fate. Others felt the chill of guilt. Chundo, hearing the news, collapsed. He didn't speak for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he died, his heart heavy with pain, his body too broken to fight. With Chundo gone, and Liona presumed dead, Kembu rose without challenge. The elders, unsure but afraid, crowned him the new chief, and just like that, the boy who had once lived in his sister's shadow now ruled the village. His lies had worked. The fire had done its job, or so he thought. The fire roared as Liona fell, but death did not take her. Instead of burning to ashes, her body dropped through a hidden crack beneath the ceremonial pit. She landed hard, broken and scorched, in a strange underground cavern. It was warm, too warm, but not with the heat of death. It pulsed, like a living thing. This was the Cave of Flames, a place whispered about in old songs, a place where ancient fire spirits once lived. Liona drifted in and out of pain, her body half burned, her spirit fading. But then, from the glowing shadows, a figure appeared, tall, cloaked in flickering light. His name was Nyala, the oldest fire spirit. His voice rumbled like thunder wrapped in warmth. You were thrown into fire, child, he said. But fire has chosen not to consume you. Fire now lives in you. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. But Nyal raised his hand, and the flames around her softened. They didn't burn. They healed. Over time, her wounds closed. Her strength returned. Her fear turned to focus. For 7 moons, Liona remained in the cave. She didn't just rest. She trained. Niall taught her the secrets of flame, how to bend it, how to speak to it, how to control it with her spirit. She learned that fire was not only destruction, it was life, light, and truth. She bathed in lava pools that gave her strength. She walked barefoot over embers. She danced with the flames, and they danced back. Slowly, her eyes changed. They glowed like coal under pressure, red and fierce. Her hands could summon sparks. Her voice could silence wind. At the end of her training, Nyala gave her a gift, a staff, glowing at the tip, forged from the heart of the eternal fire. It pulsed with energy. You are ready, he said, not just to survive, but to rise. Liona stood tall, the girl once betrayed, once broken, had become something else. Not just alive, but powerful. And above her, in the village of Mbaya, the one who tried to destroy her had no idea what was coming. Liona stepped out of the cave of flames with fire in her eyes and strength in her bones. But instead of storming back to Mbaya, she walked the hidden paths deep into Malawa forest, a place even the bravest feared. The trees there were thick like walls, the silence heavy, the air filled with whispers of old spirits and forgotten gods. In the heart of that forest lived Soma, the healer. No one knew her age. Some said she was part tree, part human. Her hut was made of vines, bones, and glowing stones. Liona found her sitting in a ring of smoke, crushing leaves with ash-covered hands. Soma looked up and said, "I've been expecting you." Liona knelt. "I want revenge," she whispered. But Soma shook her head slowly. "Number, you want truth. You want justice. There is a difference." Liona stayed. Days turned to weeks. She learned to listen to trees, to mix roots with fire, to mend wounds with songs. Soma taught her how to calm the fire inside, not kill it, but control it. "If you burn with hate, you'll become like him," she warned. Liona began to see clearly. Kembu had not just betrayed her, he had betrayed their father's legacy, poisoned the village with lies, and ruled with fear dressed as charm. So she waited, while Kembu built his fake throne, wearing beads he didn't earn, and sitting in a seat carved by his father's hands. Liona stayed hidden. She listened, she learned, she prepared, and Malawa Forest whispered back, "The time is near." Kembu sat on the chief's stool with pride, wearing the royal feathers and beads that once belonged to Chundo. But he had none of Chundo's wisdom, none of his honor. Power made him cruel. He ruled not with love, but with fear. Anyone who questioned him was punished. He ordered the burning of huts belonging to elders who resisted him. He doubled the village taxes, forcing families to sell their goats and lands just to survive. He opened Mbaya's sacred lands, places once protected by tradition and ancestral law, to greedy traders who came with coins and lies. They cut down trees, dug up the red soil, and stripped the village of its beauty. Kembu called it progress, but the people called it betrayal. He crowned himself protector of Mbaya, holding loud festivals in his honor, feeding the rich while the poor starved in silence. But the villagers whispered in corners, afraid to speak too loudly. "Liona's spirit is watching," they said. "She cannot rest." When Kembu heard the rumors, he laughed bitterly. "Let the dead girl haunt me," he said, raising his drink high. "I burned her with my own hands. She's gone." But the wind heard him, the trees remembered, and in the silence of the night, the spirits stirred. 1 year had passed since Kembu thought he had rid himself of Liona, and the village of Mbaya had slowly turned to dust under his rule. But something changed that day. The sky above the village turned blood red, as if the heavens themselves were mourning. And at the gates, a figure appeared, walking barefoot with every step like she was one with the earth. She was draped in fire-colored cloth that shimmered as though it held the sun's flames. It was Liona, alive, but she was no longer the same. Her skin seemed to glow with an inner fire, and her eyes burned with a fierce red power. The villagers, who once whispered her name in fear, now dropped to their knees in awe. She had returned, not as the broken girl Kembu had tried to burn, but as something more, something unstoppable. "I was thrown into the fire," she said, her voice carrying like the crackle of flames. "But fire gave me life." With those words, she raised her staff high, a staff that glowed like molten metal, crackling with energy. Flames swirled around her feet, and the ground trembled beneath her power. And then, as if the earth itself recognized her, the fields that had been barren for months burst into life. Dried crops that had withered under Kembu's rule suddenly bloomed with lush green. Flowers sprouted from cracked ground, and the air smelled fresh with new growth. The people watched, wide-eyed, as Liona stood like a goddess reborn, surrounded by fire and life. They no longer saw the girl they had lost. They saw the flame-born, the one who had been touched by the ancestors, who had risen from the dead with a power they could not explain. The crowd chanted her name, their voices growing louder. "Liona! Flame-born!" they cried, their voices echoing through the village like the roar of 1,000 fires. Kembu, sitting in his palace of lies, heard the chants. He stood frozen, his heart pounding. This wasn't possible. How could she be alive? How could she have returned stronger than ever? His mind raced, but there was no answer, only fear. Under the ancient baobab tree, where the village's greatest truths were revealed, the elders gathered. The air was thick with anticipation, and the entire village stood in silence. The truth trial had been called, a sacred ritual to settle the most serious of matters, and this was the most serious of all. Kembu stood before the circle of elders, his knees shaking. His face was pale with fear, his eyes wide with panic. "Lies! Sorcery!" he shouted, trying to drown out the truth that was already creeping in. He had always used his words to manipulate, but now the power was slipping away from him, and he didn't know how to stop it. But Liona, calm and powerful, stepped forward. She raised her staff, and the ground beneath Kembu began to glow with the same fire that burned within her. The earth seemed to open up beneath his feet, and to his horror, a hidden scroll emerged from the soil. The scroll unrolled before the elders and the entire village, revealing the truth. The official adoption letter from Chundo, the man who had raised her as his daughter. Liona was no stranger to this land. She had always been part of it. Then, Liona reached into the folds of her cloth and pulled out the very letter Kembu had used to lure her into the fire. She unfolded it and held it up for all to see. It was a fake, filled with lies designed to strip her of her identity and her life. The villagers gasped in shock. With a firm, steady voice, Liona called out, "I am no cursed girl. I am Chundo's daughter, chosen by the ancestors." In that moment, the wind howled, and a swirl of smoke appeared before them. The fire spirit Nyala materialized, glowing with intense heat, her presence filling the space with a power no one could deny. "Liona is chosen," Nyala spoke, her voice echoing like a blaze in the night. "Kembu is condemned." The elders bowed their heads in recognition. There was no arguing with the fire spirit, and no denying the truth of what had been revealed. Kembu's lies had been exposed, and his rise to power was now reduced to ash. The villagers, once afraid, now stood tall. They had been deceived, but the truth had come to light. Kembu, now trembling, knew there was no escape. The weight of his betrayal crushed him. His seat of power, built on lies and manipulation, was now nothing but dust. Liona had returned, not for revenge, but for justice, and in that moment, the village of Mbaya was free. Kembu's heart pounded as he turned to run, but no matter which way he fled, fire was there, dancing around him. The flames he had once used to destroy Liona now turned against him, their hot breath chasing him down. It was as if the very earth had turned against him, a cruel twist of fate that he couldn't escape. Panicked, Kembu stumbled backward and fell into the same pit where he had thrown Liona. But this time, there was no cave to save him. The ground beneath him seemed to burn with an unforgiving rage, the fire swirling around his body like a vengeful storm. He screamed, his voice lost in the crackling flames. The villagers watched in silence, their faces a mix of awe and fear. No one moved. They knew this was the end of Kembu's reign. He had once been the chief, the one who ruled with lies and greed. But now, he was nothing more than a victim of his own wickedness. The flames rose higher, engulfing him completely, until there was nothing left but ash. The next day, the village gathered again under the baobab tree. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There were no whispers of fear, no anxious glances. Instead, Liona stood before them, her presence radiant. She had returned not as a victim, but as a leader, strong, wise, and ready to heal the wounds of the past. Liona was crowned the guardian of Mbaya. The villagers cheered, their hearts full of hope for the future. No longer would lies rule their land. Liona set new laws, banning deceit, and ensuring that truth would always guide them. She taught the children the wisdom of fire, the balance between its power to destroy and to create. Every year, during the Ember Festival, Liona would light a torch, not to burn, but to remind the villagers of the lesson they had all learned. "What you throw into the fire may one day rise to burn your throne," she would say, her voice strong and steady. The fire that Kembu had used to destroy her had not only failed to break her spirit, but it had also ignited a flame of justice that would never be extinguished. And as long as Liona stood as guardian, the people of Mbaya knew they were safe, protected by the wisdom of fire and the power of truth. Wow, what an incredible journey we've witnessed today. Liona's resilience, strength, and ultimate victory over betrayal remind us that no matter how dark the road may seem, justice always finds a way to rise from the ashes. Her story is a powerful lesson about the truth, the consequences of cruelty, and the unbreakable power of the human spirit. If Liona's journey touched your heart and inspired you, Let's spread her message of hope and resilience far and wide. Share this story with your friends and family, because just like Liona, we all have the power to overcome, to rise, and to bring about change, even when it feels impossible. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in the strength of the human spirit. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story of courage, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales that remind us of the power of justice and truth. Thank you so much for watching, for being part of this journey, and for supporting stories that inspire and uplift. Together, we can keep the fire of hope alive. Until next time, stay strong and keep fighting for what's right.